Chapter 3 Problems in Perception. What we perceive and know has come to us through our senses. We perceive the world through our sense organs, but we can never be sure that everyone perceives the same thing, even if they are given the same stimulus. Any lawyer or judge can tell you how 5 or 6 persons, all present at the occurrence of a crime, may give very different accounts of what took place. Witnesses even give different descriptions of the criminal. Police officers are often reluctant to chart a description of the criminal in view of the discrepancies in eyewitness accounts. To one man, a certain young woman looks beautiful and desirable, while to another, she appears rather plain. We are attracted to some things which repel others. Tastes vary in food, clothing, color, beauty, and style of living. When we rely upon our mind, therefore, we are utilizing a highly subjective instrument. This tendency of mind to pick and choose, buddhi in Sanskrit, accept and reject, renders it difficult, if not impossible, to be an objective observer, especially if the individual's interests are at stake. Another way to look at it is to consider the mind as made of filters, bypasses, mazes, and baffles. These constitute our values, prejudices, points of view, and opinions. In order for an outside stimulus to reach our inner awareness, first it must successfully work its way through this complicated maze. Perhaps the stimulus, such as some new idea, may be repugnant to our value system. In such a case, it encounters resistance, and the mind is not eager to let the new idea enter. Have you ever noticed how easy it is to assemble facts to support a decision you have already reached? The mind will gladly cooperate in justifying its decisions. But it is quite another matter when we try to oppose the mind. Then our objectivity and discrimination are greatly diminished. For instance, suppose you have decided to quit college because you conclude that modern education is irrelevant and meaningless. You will find it easy to amass a lot of evidence that college is a negative experience and that being out on your own is a superior choice for you. The mind simply justifies its decision by assembling supporting facts. In psychology, we label this characteristic of mind cognitive consonance. On the other hand, you would find it very difficult to look objectively at the stay in college option. You would tend to resist evidence which would disagree with your preconceived notions. As each individual mind is unique, we find that people have many different perceptions of the world. Some are optimists, while others are pessimists. Some see the world as a happy place, while others bemoan their fate and cry out for release. The worldly stimuli for all of them are the same, but their individual perceptions of the situation as a key factor are often different. We must be careful in the pursuit of spiritual truth, therefore, to be constantly aware of this tendency of mind to filter and modify objective reality. Another illustration may clear up this point. If I were to put on a pair of yellow sunglasses, I should not be surprised to note that the world had turned yellow. But after a while, my mind would accommodate the yellow overcast, and I would no longer be consciously aware of the yellow distortion applied to the environment. But any psychologist could administer a color discrimination test and demonstrate that my color perception had been impaired. It may not appear that way to me, as I can still point out the various colors. But when I am objectively evaluated, it will be proved that my accuracy had decreased markedly, the yellow sunglasses having altered the reality of color. Similarly, if we try to expose ourselves to a new philosophy, but wear a pair of mental sunglasses, we will color everything that comes our way. Many intellectuals who study mysticism fall into this trap. Subconsciously, they're filtering truth that comes their way by the use of their intellectual sunglasses. In effect, They are saying, let me hear this truth, and if it goes along with the way I see things, then I'll accept it. The assumption here is a poor one, for we assume that our view of reality is the proper one and is the standard by which to judge other philosophies. As long as we approach mysticism in this way, it will always appear to be a philosophy of nonsense taught by colossal fools. And so this leads us to another important principle. Inner mystic truth cannot be perceived through intellectual prejudice. Only an unbiased mind can approach truth. Have you ever seen a computer at work? It is carefully programmed and will not undertake to solve problems beyond its ability. It will refuse to accept programs for which it was not designed. Unfortunately, the human mind is not so clever. Our mind will continue to ponder the imponderable and attempt to solve the unsolvable. For example, we all know that our mind operates along the lines of cause and effect. For every effect we observe, we look to what caused it. We cannot comprehend an effect without a cause behind it. The mind is simply not constructed that way. For ages, mankind has tried to figure out what has caused this universe which we see all about us. He reasons that animals evolved to higher forms, ultimately becoming human beings. He then reasons that the animals must have come from some lower order of life. So no doubt, the plant kingdom evolved upward to become the animal life we see today. Now he is faced with the problem of explaining where the plants came from. Perhaps he reasons that inorganic matter evolved into plants through a long and complicated process. But he is now faced with the question of explaining the origin of the inorganic matter. Off he goes in pursuit of another cause. The mind simply cannot comprehend the effect without a cause. Therefore, whenever man seeks to determine the origin of God, he is doomed to failure. For God is described as the causeless cause and the beginningless beginning. Our situation in this instance becomes very much like the computer. We are asking the mind to solve a problem which falls outside of its capabilities. Yet many of us continue to run in circles, asking the mind to compute the non-computable. We encounter a similar difficulty if we ask, why did God set up this creation? To know the creation, we must first know the Creator. Maharaj Charan Singh often says, when we merge back into the Father, then we will understand the why of the creation. But then we may not wish to know any longer. This sounds like a contradictory statement, but in truth it is not. For so long as we are within the domain of mind, these questions always arise. Only by transcending the mind, and thus its limitations, can we find satisfactory answers to this question. And then we will receive them through a facility other than the mental sphere. As we have not had any direct experience of inner truth, the question remains unanswerable, for we are locked within the limitation of the mind. Try a simple experiment. Close your eyes. Picture our solar system with its 9 planets revolving about the sun. Now imagine yourself in a spaceship flying past Pluto, the farthest planet, and continuing on into deepest space. Imagine that the voyage goes on and on. Try to visualize a universe that continues on for infinity. That is, space without end. If you succeed, you will be the first human being who ever has. Our mind imposes a fence somewhere. There must be an end. This again is due to the nature of the mind, which utilizes cause and effect and sees a beginning and an end to everything. So we know that the mind operates with the characteristic of cause and effect. Further, we know that the mind conceives of a beginning and an end and must place phenomena in some kind of logical order. This accounts for a second characteristic of mind. Everything must occupy a certain place and be fixed into a certain time slot, which is either in the present, past, or future. Mind cannot perceive of something not occupying a point in space, nor can it visualize a state of timelessness. And finally, there is a third characteristic, the illusion of free will. For example, a computer is programmed to accept only certain information. Further, the conclusion is inherent in the data. That is, the computer does not come up with any new information, but simply manipulates the existing data into various, and sometimes new, combinations. There is an expression among professional computer programmers, GIGO. This abbreviation stands for garbage in, garbage out. In other words, you will not get anything better out of the computer than you have put in. However, it appears as if the computer has free will because it comes up with a logical and well thought out solution to a problem. It hardly takes a critical observer to note that the computer is only giving out what was inherent in the raw data. Similarly, our mind must operate with the feeling that it can make choices, the exercise of free will on its own. If we felt that we did not have the ability to decide a course of action, we would find it impossible to live in this world. What we should remember is that, like the computer, our mind can deal only with the data it receives and does not have the ability to go beyond what it was designed or programmed to accomplish. Another way of looking at it relates to conditioned free will. That is, what we call free will implies freedom of choice. But how free are we to choose? We had no choice as to when we were born, where we were born, or who were to be our parents. Neither have we controlled the financial circumstances into which we were born, nor the kinds of brothers and sisters we have. Yet each of these factors, and many more besides, conditions the way we think. All decisions we make are influenced by our society, our family upbringing, our education, our past experiences and associations, and any prior decisions we made in life. How, then, are we truly free? There is another contradiction in free will, at least an apparent contradiction. If God has as one of his characteristics the power of omniscience, then he knows everything. For instance, God surely knows when this planet will come to an end. If he knows this, then the end of this world must be fixed and certain. It must be predestined, therefore, for it is known in advance what the outcome will be. Predestination and free will can hardly go together. Free will means we have choices to make, and the outcome is uncertain, while predestination says that everything has already been determined for us, and that we have no options. If, for example, I can alter the moment of my death by just a minute or so, and thus deceive God, he can hardly be omniscient. As you can see, it is an apparent contradiction to have an all-knowing God as well as free will. For if we can change anything and he does not know it, he is not omniscient. Saints tell us that one day, when we attain God realization, we will understand. In the meantime, there is little that can be said, since it is the mind which has to understand this principle. But saints do make an attempt. If we cannot understand, it is not because they, the saints, do not know the answer. It's merely that they cannot adequately explain it through the medium of mind and words. Saints tell us that our free will is conditioned. We go through the process of making a decision, but we always wind up by choosing that course which lies in our destiny. Our mind will simply justify and validate the choice according to the already discussed habit of cognitive consonance. we will honestly feel that it was our own decision, arrived at through careful deliberation. But in actuality, we will have chosen what we were ordained to choose. For example, Christ tells his disciples that they did not choose him as their master, as was their belief. Rather, Christ says, "Ye have not chosen me, but I have chosen you, and ordained you, that ye should go and bring forth fruit, and that your fruit should remain, that whatsoever ye shall ask of the Father in my name, he may give it you." John 15:16. To the disciples, it may have appeared as if they had voluntarily chosen Christ as their master, but it was in their destiny to do so. Just as in a play, the ending is written and firmly fixed, similarly, we are all moving towards our divine destiny, although we may play out various roles along the way. The players may have a slight degree of latitude in the lines they speak, but the acts are written and move toward the author's conclusion. The writer had an interesting experience along these lines when an employment opportunity arose in India. It offered the incentive of living in physical proximity to the living master, Maharaj Charan Singh of Beas. There were a number of obstacles in the way of making the necessary 2-year contractual commitment, and, therefore, the master was consulted. His advice was, "Consider the offer from all points of view, and looking to the future prospects, you can decide as you think best." We had to consider the possibility of forfeiting tenure as a college professor of world religion. Further, there were problems of selling a newly acquired home and automobile, as well as a liquidation of various debts. At each step, decisions were called for, and we made the very best ones we could after considering all points of view as directed by the master. The ultimate result was a successful move to India, as all problems had been eliminated one by one. At the time, it certainly appeared as if we could make any choice we wanted, and could have decided against the move at any point. It appeared as if we were exercising our free will. But, as we were later to learn, coming to India had been a part of our destiny in this life. As we looked back on the decision-making process, we saw how it had all happened. Each crisis called for us to make a rational decision. We weighed the facts and based our decisions on them. The results of any particular decision influenced all future decisions, so that free choice was reduced by stages. For example, for someone driving in the US, taking a turn to the south as opposed to the north influences all other turns which are made subsequently. Once having turned south at Chicago, a driver cannot elect to go to Detroit. Similarly, each decision we made closed the gap still further until, when the final decision to go or not go had to be made, there was only one possible conclusion: to go. If you are a beginning chess player matched against a master player, you may feel you have complete freedom to move your pieces anywhere you choose. The moment you make your first move, however, you have restricted your freedom. Each subsequent move reduces your choices still further, and your options keep decreasing move after move. Ultimately, there is only one move you can make. The master chess player can decide at the outset to win the game at a certain point on the board. He, being a master, can manipulate the game in such a way as to accomplish his purpose while at the same time letting his opponent feel that he has made voluntary moves throughout the game. So skillful is the master player that this subtlety escapes the novice player. This is precisely where we stand with regard to free will. We will find, masters tell us, that our free will increases as we rise higher in consciousness. When we become one with the Lord, we will be truly free. But the further away we are from the Lord, the less free will there is, due to the many encumbrances of mind which restrict our ability to make independent choices. Perhaps the term conditioned free will is most applicable to our situation on this plane of consciousness. For example, we once asked Maharaj Charan Singh why he so frequently advised a disciple to make up his own mind. He replied that through the reasoning process, the individual would only select the action that had been predestined for him. By the process of reasoning, however, the mind would conclude that it had, in fact, reached this decision on its own. Since free will means the ability to choose without restriction or limitation, it is obvious that under these conditions, the mind is not operating freely. Therefore, it is a tendency of mind to intellectually justify destiny. Before we leave the subject of free will, there is one additional factor which needs to be mentioned. It is the working of the law of karma, which will be examined in a future chapter. The addition of the karmic law will clarify the discussion of free will. Having seen how the mind functions in this world, no doubt, some seekers will wonder if there is any purpose in making any decisions, as they do not know whether they have free will in the decision or whether it is predestined. If we think this way, we are creating an unnecessary burden to our already overtaxed mind. Mind needs to feel it can make decisions. Therefore, we should certainly allow it to do so. But we must realize that the outcome may not be in our hands. And if events turn out contrary to our expectations, we might now understand why. No doubt, there are many other characteristics of the mind which can be studied by an interested seeker. But Sant Mat is the science of the soul as opposed to the science of the mind. Soul is above mind. Mind is its servant. Therefore, we shall not go into a deep analysis of mind characteristics, for this is not necessary in order to tread the path to liberation. In this book, we are dealing only with basic introductory principles conducive to the understanding of the teachings of the saints, and no more. Those who pursue the study of Sant Mat will find that each point covered in this book is richly elaborated upon in other Sant Mat literature for the benefit of the ardent seeker.